Welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, episode 43. Today's episode is an interview with Steve Kloyda, who refers to himself as the prospecting expert. In this interview, Steve discusses the communication strategies necessary for successful prospecting. So grab your hammer and your gold pen and hitch up your burros, podcast listeners. We're heading out into them thar hills looking for prospects.
All right, so this is Jenn Swanson with Communication Diva, and I would like to introduce Steve Kloyda to you today, and thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Jenn, it's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
That's wonderful to finally connect. I know we've tried a few times, so it's good to make it work this time. I wanted to ask you, first of all, about the term prospecting expert, because we have this, you are considered to be the prospecting expert, and I'm wondering why.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a philosophy that I can't teach somebody something that I have never experienced before. In other words, Jenn, I couldn't teach you how to ride a motorcycle. We would all end up in the hospital. And, maybe you've heard a saying before, those who can do and those who can't teach.
Yes.
Heard that, and maybe your listening audience has heard that before. But again, I can't teach anybody how to ride a motorcycle. So the reason I'm considered the prospecting expert is since 1980, I've personally made over 250,000 sales and prospecting calls. I've listened to and analyzed more than 25,000 actual sales calls where I've analyzed them, and I've had over 6,000 one-on-one coaching sessions. So maybe in addition to the prospecting expert, you could talk a little bit about, communication skills. To be a great communicator, you have to have these skills. In other words, when you're coaching people, you have to be an excellent communicator. So that's why I think people have called me the prospecting expert.
Excellent. And that's the name of your website as well.
Yes.
Yeah, prospectingexpert.com.
Yes.
I want to ask you, for those who are listening who don't know, what is prospecting?
Well, think about it. We are all in sales, okay? Have you seen a good movie lately? Have you read a good book lately? Have you gone to a good restaurant lately? Did you tell somebody about it, Jenn?
Absolutely.
Okay. When we were growing up, we had this fear. Our parents told us never to talk to salespeople, right?
Right.
All right. They also told us never to talk to strangers as well. All right. So our listening audience, and Jenn, I know you have kids, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So if your children want to go to the mall, how many times will they ask you to take them to the mall?
Well, a few times, I imagine.
Until two things happen. One, they're either at the mall or in their room, but they're going somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And we are all in sales. Maybe we don't have the official title of a salesperson, but we're always communicating. And this is what's so important about, and I love Communication Diva, because communication is the key to everything. So when you think about it, prospecting is really the foundation for all successful companies, all successful entrepreneurs. Whether you're looking for a career change, whether you're going on a job interview, whether you're communicating your company's value, prospecting is the foundation. And really what prospecting is, the definition is in search of or to labor for. And we're all searching for new opportunities. We're searching for new customers, and we're searching for business from our existing customers. And I think one of the greatest examples of that in the marketplace today is Apple. I mean, Apple was on the verge of bankruptcy in 1997. They are considered the most valuable company in the world today with over a $600 billion market capitalization. And do you think they were good at communicating their value and their uniqueness to the marketplace? Do you think they were?
Absolutely. They're everywhere.
Right. So prospecting isn't a dirty word. It's not a bad word. We all prospect.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because if you aren't in sales, you could still learn something from what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when you're coming at it from a business perspective, when you're talking about prospecting, where do prospects come from? And is a prospect a thing, a person? What
A
is
prospect, a prospect is actually a person, okay? And our prospects may come from a variety of sources. They may come from leads that our company had purchased. They may come from our warmer or natural market, people that we may know. Jen, you've received a referral before, haven't you?
Absolutely.
Okay, so our prospect come from referrals from clients or family or friends. What about centers of influence? Very influential people, and I'll give you an example. Cliff Ravenscraft. He's like a center of influence. You know Cliff, right?
I certainly do. I just had a call with him recently.
And Cliff knows everybody. So Cliff is a very strong center of influence that he can influence his circle of friends, and he could actually refer you to those people. Our prospects may even come from associations that we belong to, chambers of commerce, BNI, Rotary, networking groups, meetups, you name it. You and I had the opportunity to meet for the first time in Las Vegas at Blog World in June in New York, didn't we?
Yeah, in New York. Yeah, we did.
Right, exactly. And so that was a perfect opportunity for you and I to connect and engage. And how many other people did you meet at that event?
Oh, numerous. I can't even count them right now.
And some of those individuals became your prospects, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Right. And prospects also come from social media such as Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or Pinterest. And so our prospects may come from a variety of sources.
So you're saying that there are people that we connect with that may potentially develop relationship with us.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, so what about communication tools? What communication tools do you favor, and which ones do you not favor when you're talking to somebody who is a prospect?
Well, when I first started out in sales some 32 years ago, all we had is the telephone. All right. And I was given a telephone and a desk. Now, before I started out in my sales career, I would actually call on potential employers, and communicate effectively my value that I could bring to the company. So you see, the telephone is a very important tool. Whether you're in sales or you're not in sales, it doesn't matter. The telephone is a great tool in which to connect and engage with your target audience, with friends, with families. Now we have email today. We have snail mail. We have voicemail. We have text messages. I can call my son on the phone, leave him a voicemail message, and guess what? He will never call me back. You've experienced that?
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay. But they'll text message you, won't they?
Yeah, that's how we communicate a lot of the time. Mm-hmm.
That's it. I can text message my son. I'll get a response within 5 minutes. But if I leave him a voicemail, I'll never get a call back. We have video today, and as I mentioned a little while ago, we have social media, every platform you can possibly imagine. And the way that I look at all these tools, and if you think about prospecting back in the 1850s, all right, you've got the old prospector, he's leaning over the stream and he's panning for gold with a tin pan. That was the tool in which he had to utilize to mine for gold. All right. Today we have multiple different tools, and it really comes down to you have to find the tool that is appropriate for you. Now, let me give you an example. I love to fly fish for trout. All right.
Yep.
And there's two parts to this story. The first part is I love to fly fish for trout, and there are several lakes within about a 30-minute radius of my house. I can go to every one of those lakes and fly fish for trout, and guess what? I will never catch a trout. Why? Because there ain't no trout in them there lakes.
Aha. Either that or you're not using the right kind of fly, right?
And that's the second part of the story. I'm not using the right kind of fly. So if I want to catch a trout, I have to go to a designated trout stream. Okay. So last summer, I drove 23 hours to Glacier National Park. I hiked up into the mountains. I found this beautiful turquoise blue lake, and I found a feeder stream coming into the lake. And I knew that the trout had to be by the feeder stream. So I approached the feeder stream. There was a drop off about 25 feet. You could actually see the fish down there. I opened up my fly box. I took out the best fly that I've ever tied. I threw it out there. Nothing. 20 minutes later, still nothing. I picked the second fly. Another 15, 20 minutes, nothing. This went on for about 3 hours. Now, if I was a trout, I would have taken every one of those flies. But here's the thing. I'm not a trout.
Right.
What I thought was attractive the trout did not think it was attractive. So I opened up my fly box again. I selected the ugliest fly I could find. In fact, I was embarrassed. I was actually embarrassed to tie this fly on. First cast, bam! I caught a beautiful 18-inch cutthroat trout. And within 45 minutes to an hour, I caught several cutthroat trout. Now, this taught me a valuable lesson. Number one, you have to really understand your target audience. Who is your target audience? If you're seeking employment, who is the target audience within the company that you have to connect with? If you're a small business owner, who is your target audience that you're trying to communicate your unique value or your unique message to connect and engage? Now, once you understand your target audience, then is what is the tool in which you're going to utilize to connect and engage, whether it's the telephone, email, voicemail, text messaging. So I have clients that will not respond with an email. They will not respond with voicemail. The only way they will respond is with a text message. And I have clients that hate email. The only way I can talk to them is with the telephone. So you really have to understand the tools and your target audience.
So how do you determine that, Steve? How do you determine, without making mistakes, how do you determine which one is the best tool?
You have to make mistakes.
Oh, okay.
That's the only way. Is it's a process of elimination. And when I typically connect with somebody for the first time, I ask them the question, for all future communication, what tool would you prefer that I utilize to connect and engage with you? Oh, you want me to text message you? Great. What is your mobile phone number? So I always ask questions to find out what is the best way to connect and engage with my audience. But typically now when I'm prospecting, if let's say I receive a referral from you, you and I had a great conversation, you felt that there was somebody within your audience that I could help, you referred them to me, the first thing that I would do would make a phone call because I like making phone calls. Mm-hmm. If you didn't respond with that, then I would follow up with an email and so on, and then I would build it from there.
Okay, so it has to do with what is the best tool that is suited to the person that you're talking to, and yeah, that makes sense. So and would that apply also to somebody who was seeking employment somewhere, if they were wanting to communicate with the person that they were maybe being interviewed by? Would that be something that person should do as well as ask?
Absolutely. You ask first, all right? And initially, it may be a telephone call. Maybe you connect with them on LinkedIn, and there's a way for you to communicate through LinkedIn and send email with LinkedIn, and eventually there's going to be a phone call. Now, a lot of people are afraid of making phone calls. And it goes back to one of the first things that I said earlier is when we were growing up, our parents told us never to talk to strangers. And I have drummed this into my children's head for many, many years. Don't talk with strangers, fight, yell, scream, do whatever you have to do. But the key is to identify the tools that, number one, work for your audience, and two, work for you, so it's a win-win for everybody.
And what is your least preferred method of communication for you? What do you least prefer?
Email. I really like email. I spent 3 hours this weekend trying to clean up all my email. I really prefer, I prefer using InMail on LinkedIn. I really like text messages. And you know what? I really love people calling me on the telephone. And if I'm in a meeting, they can leave me a voicemail.
Ah, there you go. That's interesting because I'm the opposite. I prefer email just because I can check it anywhere, even if I'm busy. But that's good. Good to be aware of those things. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is what would you say are 3 of the biggest mistakes that salespeople, entrepreneurs make when they are about to prospect?
Okay, and we can even expand the audience. The biggest mistakes that I think that people make in general when they prospect, all right, whether you're prospecting for a new job and you're trying to communicate effectively, or if you're prospecting for this particular sale, or you're trying to open up a particular audience for your product or service. And having worked with thousands of individuals over the past 25 years, these are the 3 biggest. The first one is, and I mentioned that earlier, is they haven't really identified their target audience and find out where they hang out, all right? So once you've identified that, then the key is to be prepared. Do not wing it. How many times have you found yourself, Jen, in the middle of a meeting and you were not prepared? What happened?
Yeah, well, I would say it didn't go as well as it could have.
Exactly. How many times have you left a voicemail for somebody and you got halfway through that voicemail and prayed to God you could start over?
Quite a few.
Right. Right. So the biggest thing, if and I really want to stress this, is to be prepared for everything. I'm a very big believer in a script or an agenda. So if I'm going to call you on the phone or if I'm going to call a prospect on the phone, I have an agenda out in front of me or a script. And the reason why I'm a big believer in scripts is because I know what happens when I'm not prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Jack Nicholson shows up on the set and wings it?
I don't think so.
No. Do you think Meryl Streep would have won Best Actress for her performance in Iron Lady had she showed up on the set and winged it?
No.
No. And how often do we show up on the set and we wing it and we don't understand why we didn't get the job? We don't understand why we didn't get the appointment, or we don't understand why our business is failing. All right. So proper planning equals peak performance. The second thing, the biggest mistake that salespeople or entrepreneurs, anybody makes, is when somebody throws you an objection or a curveball, we try and argue our way out of it. In other words, if I stick you with a pin, you would automatically say, ouch.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started out in sales, I was taught when they object and say, well, I'm not really interested in hiring you, or I'm not really interested in your product, I would say, well, I haven't given you anything to be interested in. And I'd start arguing with the person. Well, guess what? It doesn't work. So I have a real simple 3-step process in working through problems or working through issues. Number one, when the issue comes or the objection comes or whatever it is, you listen and you do not get defensive. Number two, begin to ask questions to understand it from their point of view. That is the key in all communication. And you are the communication diva. So we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right, Jen?
Absolutely.
We're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk. And when we're talking, all we're doing is repeating what we already know. So when we're working through issues or we're working through problems, we listen, we don't get defensive. We begin to ask questions to understand it from their point of view, because their perception is their reality. Mm-hmm. And the only way you can understand what the reality is by asking the right questions. Now, you may say to me, Steve, their reality or their perception is all messed up. Well, that may be true, but it is still their reality. And I think the rock band The Who said it better than anybody back in the 70s when they sang, you don't have to fight to prove you're right. And the last, go ahead, you were going to say something.
No, that's fine.
And the last part of the formula is then get off of the objection, work through the objection, and get back to the purpose of your tweet. Get back to the purpose of why you sent that message on LinkedIn. Get back to the purpose of your call. Get back to the purpose of your meeting, and continue to move forward. If you're individuals listening to this today, if you take nothing else out of this session today, remember this. The purpose of the call is to keep the purpose of the call, the purpose of the call. The purpose of the tweet is to keep the purpose of the tweet, the purpose of the tweet. The purpose of the meeting is to keep the purpose of the meeting, the purpose of the meeting. Number one, you have to have a very clear purpose why you do anything. And I think those are the biggest mistakes that most of us make when we are prospecting for either a job or business or whatever it may be.
Oh, and how many meetings have we all sat in where the purpose of the meeting gets derailed and we go off on several tangents and spend all sorts of time and energy when we're not focused on the purpose.
That's it. And it goes on and on and on. There's no reason for it.
That's true. So the 3 biggest mistakes, not planning, arguing about the objections, and not having a clear purpose.
Right, not having a clear purpose, right.
Okay, those are all very good points. I'd like to ask you about telephone skills for a moment.
Sure.
Because I noticed that is a focus of much of your work, is helping people to become better on the telephone. And part of that you've touched on already with listening and not getting defensive. And asking questions, and I'm a firm believer as a newly trained coach and such in the power of asking good questions. And I wonder, what are some of the questions that you ask to help you to understand?
Well, the biggest way, or the picture I'd like to paint is we've all put together a jigsaw puzzle at some point or another in our life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what's on the cover of the box, Jen?
The picture.
The picture. We open up the box. We spread the pieces all over the table, and each piece that we put together, what happens to the picture?
It emerges.
Yeah, it emerges and it becomes clearer and clearer. And I want everybody listening today to think of questions like a piece to the jigsaw puzzle. All right? When we were growing up, I don't know if you heard this, but this is what I heard. Steve, sit in the corner, shut up, don't speak until you're spoken to, and it's impolite to ask any questions because it's impolite to pry. So we're never really taught the art of asking the right questions. Now, whenever I talk to somebody or meet somebody, I'm always thinking about what do I want to learn about this person? So that's the overriding question is, what do I want to learn about this person? What do they like? What don't they like? What's important to them? What is their vision for the future? What motivates them to get out of bed every day? How many children do they have? Whatever it is, what are their aspirations? What do they want to accomplish? I'm always thinking about what can I possibly learn about this person? And then what I do is I break it out into two categories of questions. There are closed questions that begin with are you, do you, could you, would you, or have you? Now, those questions are designed to get a yes or no response. Jen, how many times have you found yourself in a phone conversation or in a meeting or in an interview and you couldn't get the person to open up?
Well, having been very well versed in open-ended questions, I try not to do that.
Very good. Okay, so most people, when they're not prepared, and this comes back to the biggest mistakes, most people, when they're not prepared, it is an automatic default to go to yes/no questions that begin with are you, do you, could you, would you, have you. I'll give you an example. And for your listening audience, you guys are going to think that I'm a jerk. I'm not a jerk. I am a teacher. I was driving down the freeway one day, Jen, and my wife said, Steve, do you have a pen? And I said, yes. And she says, well, give it to me. Well, honey, that's not what you asked me. I know you think I'm a jerk, Jen, but I'm not. She asked me a closed question. Steve, do you have a pen? If she wanted to use my pen, Steve, I notice you have a pen. I would like to use it. All right.
Yeah.
It's a whole different arena. All right. When I was a stockbroker, first question I would ask you, have you been in the stock market before? If you said yes, I went down one path. If you said no, I went down another path. All right. And that's the key to getting people to open up. And you said it, open-ended questions that begin with who, what, when, where, and how. If you want to open up a conversation, it's important that you ask open-ended questions. And that is the key to all communication. First of all, what is the jigsaw puzzle? What is the picture? What are the missing pieces to this situation that you need to fill in? Then what are the questions that I'm going to ask to acquire that information, which will fill in the picture?
I like that analogy. That's a good one. I wanted to ask you about The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Yes.
I love The Wizard of Oz. And
tell us why.
Well, that movie has taught us about everything that we need to know about life, about communication, about sales. And that movie really answered 5 major questions. All right. So I'm going to give you each question, and then I'm going to actually take you through this exercise. So, question number 1, what was Dorothy's primary purpose throughout that entire movie, Jen?
To get home.
To get home. All right. So, what is the purpose of your call? What is the purpose of this meeting? What is the purpose of me posting this on Facebook? What is the purpose of this interview? What is the purpose of my life? Why am I on this planet? All right. Once we understand what our purpose is, the question is, who is the right person or people or persons that can help us accomplish our purpose in life, accomplish the purpose of this call, accomplish the purpose of this meeting? All right. So in the movie, Dorothy lands on the Wicked Witch. Remember, the house fell on the Wicked Witch, killing the Wicked Witch.
Right.
Purpose number 1 was, her primary purpose was to get home. Who was the right person that Dorothy originally thought could help her get home?
I guess the Glinda, the witch, the white witch, the good witch.
Well, it was the wizard.
It was the wizard. Okay, right.
Glinda came into the picture, into the bubble, and Glinda said, you need to go see The wizard in Emerald City. That was the person that Dorothy originally needed to talk to. So when you're prospecting, who is the right person that I need to talk to? Or who are the right people that can help me accomplish this goal? Or who are the right people that would help me in this particular situation? All right, so question number 3 is, what was the game plan to get from Munchkin Land to Oz?
What was the game plan? I'm trying to remember this movie. It's been a long time. They were walking, weren't they?
We're walking on what, though?
On the yellow brick road.
There we go. There's the game plan. So Dorothy said, how do I get to Oz? And Glinda said, follow the yellow brick road. That is your script. That is your agenda. That is your outline for the meeting, whatever it is. That is your outline and your goals for life, whatever it may be. All right, so now, Glinda didn't tell them about all the obstacles that they were going to encounter. They encountered the Wicked Witch along the way. The Wicked Witch lit the Scarecrow on fire. Then they ran into the lion, and then they got to the big field. They could see Emerald City off in the background, and they got into the field of the poppy field, and then they fell asleep, and it was one obstacle after another. So within your game plan, you have to have plans and strategies for when the obstacles arise. All right, so they get to Oz. They get to Oz. They knock on the door. The little guard sticks his head out of the porthole, and they said, why are you here? And they said, well, we want to see the wizard. And this is what he said. Nobody sees the wizard. Nobody, not anybody, never, nobody sees the wizard. And he gets ready to slam the door, and he says, go away. And Dorothy said, well, the good witch, Glinda the good witch, sent us. And he goes, well, why didn't you say so? That's the power of a referral. She was referred by the good witch. So you always want to bring the referral into the beginning of every meeting, into the beginning of every conversation, because it brings credibility. All right, so they get in to see the wizard, and the wizard says, all right, here's question number 4. What was the solution that the wizard wanted? He said, you bring me the blank, and I will grant all of you your wish. It was the witch's broom.
Right.
So they went out and they got the witch's broom. They ran back down that long hallway. They dropped the broom in front of the wizard, and the credits started to roll, and the movie was over, right? No, that didn't happen. And here's the important one. What was the next step? What was the next step for the lion? It was to get courage.
Yeah.
What was the next step for the Tin Man?
To get a heart.
Get a heart. What was the next step for the Scarecrow?
To get a brain.
To get a brain. And what was the next step for Dorothy?
To go home.
To go home. So these 5 questions will apply to sales, to business, to job interviews, to life in general. What is the purpose? Who are the right people that can help me? What is the game plan to get there? What is the potential solution? What is the potential solution that I need to solve the problem for my customer? What is the potential solution I need to solve my problem? And then always, what is the next step? And this is where communication is critical. I've worked with thousands of salespeople that end a meeting, end a phone call, and they do not clearly communicate the next step or the next follow-up in the entire sales process. So that's why I love the movie The Wizard of Oz.
I love this. I'm going to have to take notes when I listen to it again. That's great. I'll have to watch The Wizard of Oz again as well. That's fabulous. So you have developed the methods that you teach to people over many years in business. 30 years, you say?
Yes, 30.
In communication. And tell me about some of the customer relationships that you have found significant.
You name it. I've worked with very large organizations, as well as organizations that have 3 to 4 people. And it's all around communication. It's all around prospecting. It's all around sales. In other words, Jen, if you had the cure for cancer, how many cancer patients would you approach every day?
Every single one I could.
Every single one. And that's really what I teach, is that, it's basics and fundamentals, the relationships that I've developed over the years, I've had 6,000 one-on-one sessions, and I love working with people. I love helping them grow. So whether it's a small organization or a large organization, it's amazing when people really realize that they had the cure for cancer, to solve people's problems, then it's the moral responsibility to go out and tell your story. And that's all you're doing. You're going out and telling your story.
Mm-hmm. Storytelling is so powerful. That was the topic of the last podcast. So there you go. I'm wondering if you have one last piece of advice before we let people know where they can find you.
The biggest piece of advice that I can give all of you is this statement: results are the measure of how well I've applied what I have learned in life. Everybody wants results. You want results, Jen. Your customers want results. My customers want results. If you want to change the results, we must learn something. That's part of what this little podcast is about. It's been learning. But see, knowledge is not power. It's the application of the knowledge that changes the result. All right. So results are truly the measure of how well I applied what I learned in life. So when I hang up from this podcast today, the greatest determining factor where I'm going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from today is how well I continue to apply the things that I learn in life. So let me share one final story to illustrate my point. When my children were very young, they wanted to set up a lemonade stand. So they said, Dad, would you help me? I said, sure. So we got a table and chairs. I made a big sign, lemonade, 25 cents. We mixed up a pitcher of lemonade, got a jar for the money, and I walked everything up to the park for them. I set everything up, and they both sat down and they waited. And they waited. And they waited, and they waited. Pretty soon, my son comes running over, and he goes, Dad, it's not working. I said, Joshua, go back over to the table and start prospecting. Start yelling. Who wants lemonade? How many of you want lemonade? It's only 25 cents. Oh, he didn't try and figure out what was wrong in the question. He didn't say, Jen, would you like any lemonade? He said, Jen, how many glasses of lemonade do you want? And within about 30 minutes, they sold out of all their lemonade. And I observed the following. They both started running and jumping and skipping with all the rest of the kids. Isn't that like success? We achieve a certain level of success, and what do we stop doing? We stop applying all the things that we've learned. What they should have done is come running back over when they were almost out of lemonade and say, Dad, we're almost out of lemonade. We got to go get some more. See, I think success teaches us complacency. Now, when they were sitting there waiting originally for people to come to them, isn't that like some of our listeners today? They're waiting for something to happen. They're waiting for a better economy, or they're waiting for better leads, or we're waiting for better opportunities. No. Results are the measure of how well we apply what we learn in life.
Wise words, Steve.
I love that. Thank you.
If people want to find out more about you and connect with you, how can they do that?
Couple of places. The best place to connect with me is the prospectingexpert.com. Again, that is the prospectingexpert.com. Also, you can email me at steve@theprospectingexpert.com. For those of you who have an iPhone, I have an iPhone app. And all you have to do is go to your app on your iPhone. You can download it for free. And I also produce a podcast every week. And again, you go to theprospectingexpert.com and you can subscribe there or subscribe at iTunes. That's the best place to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this conversation today. And I'm sure that you have given all sorts of things to the listeners of Communication Diva, things to ponder, things to think about, and hopefully things to put into action. So I'm very grateful for this conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate it. And I'll leave your listeners with one final note. What Doc said to Marty in Back to the Future 3, he said, your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. So there you have it, Communication Diva listeners. Prospecting for business, for sales, and for life in general. That was the interview with Steve Kloyda from theprospectingexpert.com. And next week, I'm going to be bringing you an interview with an author named Sonia Haynes and her new book called The Power of Money. So if you're interested in finding out about how we communicate with others and with ourselves about money, which is a huge topic, then stay tuned for that next week. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful week. It's getting really chilly here. I had to scrape my car this morning. And the weather is certainly turning. I hope you stay warm wherever it is you are. And please do feel free to come over to communicationdiva.com. Say hello, leave a comment, come follow me on Twitter or Facebook, and just make a connection. I would love to communicate with you. Thanks again. This is Jenn Swanson. Talk to you soon.